Cool. Well, yeah, sorry everyone. I was like trying to make sure we get David in here, and as I kind of went over, the first couple of agenda items were for one reason or another fairly quick. So, wanted to give David a second as the second member of the Composable CVC, just a chance to introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and also just like I know everyone's busy, so just yeah, really grateful for everyone who's taking time out of their day, and honestly would love to be in touch with each one of you if it's helpful. Like it says a lot that just showing up right in the middle of a Friday to a call like this is meaningful. I'm David. I kind of originated this joke brand project, which has taken on a few iterations. I'm currently working on a product called Joke Race, which is a tool for on-chain contests of any variety, where people need to make multiplayer decisions. And so the way it works is people can submit responses to a prompt and then vote on their favorites. And within that framework, there's a lot of options for games and for grants and for hackathons and for DAO governance and things like that too. Which is to say, like a lot of my own interest is not actually necessarily the particular decisions that we make, but how we make them. And thinking about that process of what would it mean to improve the methodology for making decisions. I think the other thing that part of the reason I'm really love Maker and I'm really excited to be here and be part of Maker is because I think it's the greatest social DAO that there is. Uh, and a lot of times we think of social DAOs having, like that be the means in the end to create a social community. And I think Maker is really special because when you make the end not having a social community, the end is, changing finance and creating these better alternatives for on-chain stablecoins. Like you actually create a much stronger social community that way because you have a bunch of people who are united or occasionally divided around a goal. And so to be here is really exciting because I think just in terms of like where's the greatest alpha, where are the greatest conversations, like both so that it's better indexed and more accessible and like easy to participate, but also is able to draw more people in. I personally the Maker forums are both the joy and bane of my existence because they have so much, it's just such a wealth of incredible knowledge, but I personally find sometimes hard to access and reach. And so thinking about Maker as a social DAO, I would say is also something I'm personally interested in. How can we, acquire and get more people involved by better surfacing some of the really incredible conversations that are going on? And so, yeah, that's again to say, like, I'm not here with an agenda on necessarily what a stable coin should be, although I do have opinions there too. But I'm more interested in, the kind of methodologies that we're setting up that will allow the real, greatest minds in the space to be incentivized to participate in those conversations and come to those decisions as well. So sorry, that was a lengthy intro, and also glad to catch up with everyone here.
No, it's great, and it's funny because we kind of covered this in the last meeting, but this kind of credible neutrality type of angle, I think we're starting to find the words for how that actually does manifest in, the governance frameworks and like the opinion that Composable CVC has, which is kind of this bias for, like using tools instead of some of these
Yep.
novel, like discussions and being able to automate some of these decisions, being able to surface relevant information as it becomes available. And it's funny, I was, doing some light reading of the Constitution again to try and feel like competent enough to even participate in some of these calls. And one of the lines that really stuck out to me, and Open Sky, who's not here yet, but is our third member of the CVC, pointed out last week, is just this mandate for this group to really use these tools to surface truth in the DAO, and like that being kind of like our focus is this organizational alignment, right? Like obviously as we make proposals, which is the output of what this group is going to do this quarter specifically around these primary scopes, which I think for today's conversation we're focusing on decentralized collateral and real world asset collateral. Like again, we're not the experts in the room, but to the extent that we can make sure that the people in this room that are participating in multiple CVCs and like have some of the organizational knowledge that maybe, David and myself don't necessarily come to the table with. Yeah, just helping to make those decisions easier. And on that note, so like I said, we ran 3 joke contests actually last week, up until today. And I would love to figure out moving forward, because we're taking a different approach. David, just so you know, like basically what we came to the conclusion of in the last meeting was that while the setup of these meetings themselves are supposed to check the box of over the course of this quarter having at least 1 meeting per each of the 12 scopes, we are like, how do we bias for the areas we can actually make the most impact in? So making sure we're checking the box of, okay, if this week again is decentralized collateral and real world asset collateral, how do we leverage the people in this room who are attending other CVC meetings, who might have more of the relevant, like immediate impact items for us to discuss, but also not to just spend an hour talking about something when we could be, making decisions that we are more suited for, or surfacing priorities across all of the different groups so that we're not all kind of just like duplicating work over and over again. So on that note, thank you, Code Knight, for surfacing a couple of governance friction points in the joke race from last week. But as we think about like moving forward in getting more participation, to your point, David, like I think the joke contests are a core tool that we want to use to be able to, like we said, focus
Mm,
on surfacing truth in the DAO so that all these groups can make decisions.
yep.
For us, that'll probably bias towards, again, using other stakeholder groups to surface
Yep.
the best inputs and move more towards like the automation. And that's
Yeah.
kind of our bread and butter.
Yeah, and if we can work with other CVCs, I think, we're called Composable CVC for a reason, which is, we want to be able to plug in. And yeah, I also think, there's also just broader questions I have of like, when there's friction and people are getting into fights with each other, is that a feature? Is that a bug? Some people really like being able to have those engagements. Other people are really put off by them. And so like, what way can we use stuff like the contests, so that it's getting everyone to offer proactive feedback? Like, thank you, Code Knight, for the participation. In a way that like people are still having a lot of say, but always in a way that is proactive and actually creating a better alternative, that's out there. And then that point about curating, I think, all the ideas that are out there and using this as a curatorial tool, that makes a lot of sense too. Like AI really makes ideas cheap in some ways, but curating them is still the real value. And so thinking about ourselves as like a curatorial group, like we want to be able to surface the best ideas from all the CVCs and from everyone in the community, and like figure out what the best incentives for that are, and is it, as you said, like what is the meeting structure also, LDF, like will we get a lot of people in if there's you only have to come to the first 15 minutes and it's action packed, versus like, do we want 2-hour conversations where we can bring in the experts and really let them speak? So I don't
Yeah.
have answers to that, but I'm raising that for the group as a whole, in terms of thinking our success will really be, and I think come down a lot to not just the impact of and intelligence of the individual people here, but like how we coordinate.
Yeah, and on that note, again, like I think we were very clear in the last one to just say that we want to learn from the other CVCs. So I'm curious for anyone here, like all the ADs who have been attending other meetings this week and last week, like what have you seen that has been working, or are there gaps in where we might be able to like fill those cracks? Because again, I think part of the original conversation we had was a lot of all of the CVCs are going to have certain decisions that need to get made in terms of how they make decisions, like at least in this beginning stage. And so wherever we can help to do that, and for example, like Tim just said, we should do an ACE, like composable CVC, ask community everything. But that was even the point of the first joke race that we decided to run, which was like, where are the governance friction points? And anyone can submit that, and any CVC can decide to weigh those responses however they deem, most valuable to them or most in line with their goals. But like for us, how do we just streamline that across all the conversations that are happening around the same scope every week? Does anyone have any insights on like what's been working this week and last, or what's improved or needs improvement now that we're in week 4, I think? Nothing. Because I think one of the points was just that there were a lot of overlapping conversations. Again, if everyone comes into the room and says, we're all trying to figure out how to hire, subject matter experts, and this week it's stability and liquidity, like we're gonna have a lot of overlapping action items, and also experts that we want to pull in to do, let's say, like a presentation like one guy was willing to do today, which hopefully he should be here at some point to talk about ALM.
So the idea of all the AVCs getting together during the week is to have universal alignment, right? I think the key word for MakerDAO is alignment. That's just a huge word. Otherwise, either an AD or an AVC could be in trouble being banned or not be a part of the ecosystem for MakerDAO in the end game. So most of the AVCs this week were focusing already on MIP 106. And a lot of the discussion was around growth. What are the things that Maker needs to focus on right now? I think what's been working, which is a good question, is a lot of presentations are being made for some of the AVCs. Also had somebody invited on Tuesday, I believe, by the Refi AVC. So a guest speaker similar to what you're having today. Yesterday, just had a discussion on some of the new proposals that were put in the last 36 hours related to the MIP 102 sub proposals, which is a big portion of that and I haven't finished reading it because there's about 100 pages of governance stuff in there. So biggest thing that resonated with me again was the alignment part, where CVCs should try to work together and come align for the same common goal, right? So one of the biggest things that I'm a big fan of, and that's just speaking on behalf of 3F, is the use of AI and the build out of CASE, which is the artificial intelligence. I can't remember what the acronym stands for right now. So, getting that alignment across every AVC is super important. Also on the real world assets, getting some alignment there. Also, what's going to work, and getting the advisory council. Speaking of RWAs, hiring of the advisory council is super important right now. It's almost like priority one. So I think that's been the focus this week so far. And yeah, some AVCs are still on MIP 103, 104, 105. But I believe a couple, maybe just one, has moved to 106 and moving to 107 next week. So yeah, we've got a little bit of catching up here, but I'm pretty sure we'll get it done.
I love that, especially since that was kind of the focus for us, and obviously just spiritually aligned with alignment. Is on that note, like, how do you feel like we could be doing a better job of surfacing? Because it's great to have some of these presentations, especially if we can save the time and the process of bringing in the advisory members. But like, at least for me, I think we could be doing a better job of surfacing some of those insights so that, people don't need to attend every single CVC meeting, for example, to get those learnings, I guess.
You're referring to aligned delegates or just the community members?
Yeah, just like you said, that's what's working, but like, how could we do it better? How could
Yeah, it's a good question. I think kind of, since this is the last call for AVCs right now, right? It's Friday, so you guys have an advantage
Yeah.
over everyone else. I think it can make it easier if kind of recapping. We could do a recap of the weekly AVC meetings. Spend like, I don't know, whatever, 5-10 minutes on that real quickly, and then move on to the, every week you have to discuss a MIP, right? Right now, currently there's 12. So move
Yep.
on to a discussion about the MIPS. If you have an invitee that comes on, we could do that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a structure. I think you just have to kind of do something that's a
I
little
love
bit
the
innovative.
weekly
Yeah.
recap. I think that's a great idea.
If I can
Yeah.
interject a little bit,
Please.
yeah, I think I'll sort of frame it in the context of like what an AVC is supposed to do, which is what I think Frank was trying to say, but kind of missed the bucket that it all falls into, which is, every quarter there's a position paper, but there isn't a template, there isn't a strict format, there's no limits, right? Which means like for this CVC, especially AVC, whatever, you can experiment a lot. I actually like Frank's idea of being ahead of everybody else rather than feeling like you have to press catch up. That's a good one. But
Yep.
I really have been looking to KISS CVC and Growth CVC the most for like practical, tactical things that they're doing.
Mhm.
So KISS is asking people to present each week on specific topics and then having the conversation async, kind of in two places at once, which I know is sort of annoying. So that might be a better way to, might be a theme for surfacing. And then Growth this week actually had some sound offs on their opinions for voting. I think that comes from their expertise as delegates. Those were some really nice things to see. And then Regen has been inviting guests. And you should definitely not count out Resiliency, which has their own Discord. It's all async. So I think there's a lot of experiments going on. Like Frank says, on the theme of thinking through MIP by MIP, which things need to be improved. We're all trying to figure this out together and we're not great at it, but there's like this open space to try new things rather than, pattern match, I guess.
I love that.
So yeah, that's the general framing of things that are going well and other things that could be improved and some of the advantages to being on a Friday.
I was gonna say that was it was partially intentional, but also lining up right before the joke race, which happens right after this call every week. But yeah, I honestly love this idea of almost doing a quick recap because this is what we were talking about with the scopes as well, right? Which is, hey, we might have a focus for the sake of the rules, but like we as a group, I think can align on where the highest priority topics are and just run through like have there been any key updates on any of the scopes, even if that only takes a 5-minute piece of the agenda. But yeah, I almost love the idea of being kind of the stopgap at the end of the week that says, hey, we compiled the insights from across CVCs because we're using that to help ourselves not take up so much time just repeating or rehashing things that have already happened elsewhere.
Right. Exactly. And, man, I'm really confused how to refer to each other, but I'll just say is Code Knight's been picking up the weekly recap anyway.
Amazing.
So I think it's pretty reasonable to ask like delegates to work with you in certain ways. I'd recommend using the Discord considering we're all in here
Yeah.
using hashtag speculation all day to invent fantasies and destroy ourselves. So we might as well try anyway. Be a good place to coordinate. And as for the forum being hard and that's been a challenge since it showed up when we bailed on Reddit because we couldn't get the admin keys. So, yeah, it's tough.
Amazing. Does anyone else have any insights just specifically from this week that you feel like other CVCs are either like starting to do well or where we could improve?
LDF, I was gonna say also we could run a contest at the beginning of end of meetings as well, like a 5-10 minute contest where it's like everyone puts what they want to talk about today and what they think the biggest issues are to discuss, and then picks those. And then at the end says like what are our learnings and like what was our key insights. submits those, and then we vote on those as well. And like, like a rapid fire, you get like 3 minutes to submit and 2 minutes to vote.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, we should definitely experiment with some contests. I like the idea of doing it during the week, and also I like the idea of having one open during the week too, for people to just submit like insights, and then that can be like a form of curation, maybe even for this weekly recap. That sounds like it's already happening, but maybe we could help supplement with some of the alignment wins for the week.
Yeah, totally. One other thing I feel like is a friction point that we didn't highlight as someone who kind of missed the joke races by accident, timing wise, from travel, is how do I describe this? So like, Raf isn't here, but we ran a joke race a while back to try and get maker governance sort of out of its like regular patterns and shake things up. I definitely would recommend that as a principle. Like, be using these in interesting ways. But we made the mistake of sort of narrowing the base of people who could participate. So I think there's also a place to experiment there with bringing in other communities that might have thoughts on specific topics related to specific scopes, right?
Yep.
I think that's one of, Composable's extraordinarily unique advantages, is that, in the other world of the joke races, which was really just telling dad jokes on chain, it brought together like 200 builders. And it just feels like there's this great community right there that could get involved, but we like decided to just clone maker governance into joke races, which feels like quite limiting. So that's just another
I love that because
unsolicited advice.
no, it's very solicited. Especially because like we were saying, I think the goal for us when we talk about composability is also like groups that care, that might not be like fully involved. And so I think the contests themselves are a good way to focus people into participating, like you said, like where they already have a bias for interest or expertise. And so I think even like being able to just bring a contest to another community and not just have one expert come in and present to us, I think is also a good way for people to get more visibility into the types of decisions that are getting made as well. And I think that'd be awesome. Because obviously we don't just want to rely on individual experts that are getting paid to come in and, like almost make decisions on behalf of the DAO. Like the goal should be to cultivate different groups of experts as well. Or at least like pull them in where they exist. On that note, specifically relating to the scopes, does anyone know where we're at with condensing them down? And going from 12 to 5? Okay. Yeah, I'm always still trying to like wrap my head around or balance the rules and make sure that we're following the rules as they stand, but also kind of push and break them in some cases. Not break them, just
Yeah, like I think Vigilant just posted it's going from 12 to 5. I think it's in the. I should have pulled it up before I got on the mic, but I think it's on the first scope after. Maybe it's MIP 0. Maybe somebody here knows the top of their head, but it talks about how the five main scopes that AVCs, ADs, advisory council members, facilitators should all focus on. So that's hopefully happening soon. I guess it was going to take about a month because there's a month for feedback, right, for requests for comments, and then there's a frozen period for 1 week, and yeah, then it goes to a vote.
Got it.
So
Yeah, I knew it was like in process, but I didn't know where exactly in the process. And on that note, I know it's being brought up in the chat right now, but yeah, there's so much to read constantly. And so just being able to even surface like what decision is in progress or like, yeah, just where to pay attention to is extremely helpful.
Can I just put out broadly, like, are there specific topics that people are here that they would like to discuss?
I'm always like waiting on the chat. Like I'm reading the chat and I see people typing.
yeah, I think kind of get your thoughts on how the ADs, the aligned delegates, should start putting together the position document, the scope frameworks position document, which is due at the end of the quarter. It's pretty early, but the other AVCs have already drafted from the ADs that belong to such a couple of suggestions, right? Because they're just suggestions, right? As an AD, I can only give you a suggestion, and then it's up to you, the AVC, to accept it or not, and then put it in the final draft, and you're going to submit that as your scope position document. So maybe you want to create some kind of document on Google Docs or what have you, and kind of get that going. The way I've personally have visualized it is obviously just like writing a position paper, back in the days when we were in college, well, at least for me anyway. But yeah, so kind of get that started and outline it with each MIP, right? MIP 103, MIP 104, MIP 105, MIP 106, and each AD can go in there and put a suggestion or an edit. You can get that going, so that way, we're not scrambling in the last
Yeah.
15 days to put this giant position document together.
And yeah, that sounds good. And does it make sense for like, I don't know, me to start that document? Because I'm always a little bit confused with just the roles of who does what. In terms of like the actual writing itself.
Yeah, from what I understand, and Tim Black, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. We are supposed to do a lot of the work. So by all means, if Tim wants to kick it off, he's more than welcome. I guess it's up to you to give him that permission. So we're here to help you and make suggestions and kind of help you interpret the Maker Constitution and all the MIPS and the 5 scopes. Well, eventually it will be 5 scopes instead of 12. So we're here to help with that. That's our job. And yeah, if you kind of want every single AD that belongs to Composable ABC to kind of go in there and edit the introduction, but I think it sounds to me like it should be simple, right? So it shouldn't be like rocket science. Just to,
Right.
you can say something like, "Hey, Composable ABC believes the following with regards to the 5 main scopes," and that's it. In my opinion, I could be wrong. Maybe somebody here from governance could correct me, but that's how I would do it. I am speaking from a group that, I go to the KISS, which is, keep it simple and silly. So we're trying to keep things simple. So maybe you guys want to do the same, but that's just my suggestion. I'm not trying to influence anyone here. So
That's
yeah.
great. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I just want to spike on the fact that I think everyone is sort of limiting themselves by thinking that it has to be a paper because inevitably it'll have to be written on the forums. But like, again, there's places to experiment. Like Makers had a long-standing deck culture. Like we could surface the points in that way and then actually break them into like the edits that are suggested, right? So there's a little bit more of a narrative to the values of this CVC coming out of that whole thing. Yeah, there's room for experimentation, I guess is the point. But some of the things that have been working is just people have gotten a shared Google Doc up and started working through the scopes pretty much. So
What's the
you.
most creative thing you've seen? How do
Mm,
we push this? How do we experiment a little bit more than a Google Doc, as much as Google Docs are the metaverse?
I mean, isn't Figma the metaverse?
I mean, I'm down.
I think it really just comes down to aligning with like asking for what you guys work or want, whichever platform that happens to be, to make the changes you see that have impacts. I realize that's quite vague, but it's just like, again, there's no specific instructions. So, if you guys prefer to work in a Google Doc and work header by header, that's fine. I think there's room for doing weekly summarizings, using joke DAOs to platform to surface things across other CVCs. So like running a race at the end of every call or something. I don't know. There's definitely like, I don't think anyone's going to tell you like, oh, we tried something new. Like, that was a terrible idea or something, like
I know,
at
that's
worst,
why
it
I'm
just
like,
kind of ends with a whimper.
that's kind of what I want to have a bias for, is like trying things new. Because I mean, like we've said over and over, to a certain extent, we're all kind of doing the same thing right now. So if we can bring a little bit more experimentation, that I think is our value add a little bit. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I kind of have three thoughts here. And so one is we might want to be iterative in the sense of like tackling, a different scope every week and just focusing on that. And that way we're going, you know, one by one, and we even make those like, discussion in the calls as well. Second is we might want to be iterative in the sense that we're like, have a really low stakes way of just surfacing ideas. So we just get people to like, very broadly say what they want, and then we can iterate on that further and then get their feedback at the end also. So kind of have a back and forth between broader community giving sentiment, then, maybe a more specific writing task taken from that, and then broader community giving sentiment. Actually, four ideas. Third one is we might think about AI here. Like if we have a good idea of like what sentiment is, we might be able to, it might be interesting to think about like what AI does with that, and then we curate. And so then, humans start the process and humans end the process by like saying what we want, and then and then deciding what version we want. But like in the middle, we might be able to automate a lot of this. And just generate a lot of ideas we might not have had otherwise. And so that's something I'm interested in playing with. Obviously, most of the time AI is going to be terrible. It's going to come up with bad ideas, and so that's fine. Like the
Me
point is to
too,
curate
though.
those out. Right. So will humans, right? So will I. And then the final thing is like thinking, who else do we want to draw into this group, and what incentives are we creating to draw them in so they can work on this? Who we really think are the best people to be tackling these scopes as well. And so like, are there ways like within our community we can be offering NFTs to get people on board? Could we be making them part of, this council as well? And what does the process look like for that? So I think the final things I would say is, if we have 15 minutes left, what I personally would love to cover is like, what is the process for bringing more people into this group, who we really want to trust with these kinds of tasks and make sure that they're well incentivized for it. And then also like maybe what would a schedule look like for future calls so that we are, plotting this out iteratively. But let me, before we do that, I would love everyone's feedback also.
Yeah, I say we do it. And to your point, I think like step one is how do we more effectively, I think specifically with the contests and the agendas themselves, like make this group more effective. And then I think focus on inviting more people into that process. But from what it sounds like, and again, a lot of the people that are on this call are attending other CVC meetings and like spending a lot of time actually reading through the documentation and whatnot. And so to the extent that we can make their time more effective so that we can make decisions, I think the better. And it sounds like that is coming up with a specific joke race cadence as like number one priority to me. Okay, cool. Also, hello, One Stone. Thank you for joining. We've been talking over the past couple of weeks, and ALM was a topic that has continued to surface to the top of the priority list in terms of bringing in experts. And so, One Stone, you were volunteered graciously in a number of different ways. So I know we didn't ask you to like necessarily prepare anything specific, but I think this group was just hoping that if you have some high level insights on just, yeah, your opinion on ALM and like how that's affecting Maker right now. Yeah, we won't like bombard you with questions. We've only got 15 minutes left in this call, but I think we would love to hear a little bit more about you and what you're thinking about, and then prepare any questions async afterwards, if that works for you.
Definitely. And I'm sorry, it was even later than I thought I was
No,
gonna
you're
be.
great. We had plenty to discuss. Don't worry.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Thank you so much. You guys haven't touched on ALM yet, and you want me to provide kind of like what I think
Yeah, we
the
would love
situation is? Okay.
that.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So I think MakerDAO is currently has benefited from its inability to have an ALM process in the past. And the reason I say that is because there wasn't an ALM process in the past. The majority of the assets, I think 60 to 80%, are liquid. And luckily for the DAO, the best place to be right now is in a liquid position where you're able to benefit from the highest point in the yield curve, which is overnight to 3 months. So as opposed to all the other banks, which saw a surge in deposits and in 2021, 2022, and were chasing yield at the cost of duration risk, Maker did not have a process set up to invest assets, and therefore did not take on that duration risk, and right now has all of its assets liquid and can benefit from that. So I think that is the first point where I think it's very important for us to, first of all, deploy assets like we're doing in treasuries, which are very safe and at short duration, like we're doing with that money market funds and the treasury bills. So that's where we are now. But I think there's also like you can only buy what you're capable of buying because of your liabilities. And there has been some reduction, pretty material reduction in terms of the demand for DAI. We've seen 25 to 30% reduction over the last 2 to 3 months. So it's very important to know, what we have today, which is around 4.9 billion. It's really important to know, like, why are clients leaving? Are they going to a competitor like USDC for a different use case? Are they going back to fiat to benefit from the yield? Are they using it? Is this like big clients that need the cash because they're running low, or other DAOs treasury? So I think those are things that there needs to be a better handle of, so that there's still a lot of assets that are uninvested that should be placed in the yield bearing vehicles. But it's important to also start looking at the other side so you can understand the baseline where you're at. I'll pause there for any questions, but I can keep going if needed.
Thank
I
you
see a
so
comment
much.
about
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah. I just see one about duration. That is, we say that with hindsight. A lot of banks, didn't mean to take duration risk. It was just part of the ALM processes that they had. And as they saw surge, like for example, SVB's deposits rose from 50 to 250 billion. So let's say your ALM framework is, I'm going to invest 30% of my deposits in 10-year duration, but your balance sheet inflated, 5x. Now you have this non-operational deposits invested at 10-year maturities, And obviously, as the rates go up and the Fed's balance sheet is shrinking, that 30% that is invested in 10-year became a much bigger part of their overall assets. Anything else? I see Monet said something. I'd assume a lot of people going back to fiat, USDC, decent. Yeah, I think so as well. All the stable coins market cap is decreasing. And I think a lot of it obviously has to do with the regulatory environment in the US, but also, money market funds are an all-time high. I think they are closing in at the 6 billion. With the Fed hike coming in next month, most of them are going to be yielding close to 5%, while USDC and DAI, you have a 1% or 1.5%. So yield is important, but at the same time, it's also important to know what can MakerDAO expect to be in the protocol, so that it can use to maintain not only liquid on chain, but liquid off chain until those vehicles become available on chain, and then you can deploy a larger amount and earn higher yield. I see that the DAI VSR is increasing soon. I think that's going to be a positive development that needs to be tracked. I've been a big proponent of the notice, 7-day, 14-day, 30-day, because as you raise the DSR, people start to become more rate sensitive, especially as it breaches 2-3% and goes up to 4%. You start earning that yield on your DAI, and you become rate sensitive to it. So you want to ensure that when rates do come down, and they are forecasted to come down later in this year or next year, you're able to drop the rates while not losing a lot of your market. But overall, I think the DAO is taking the necessary steps to improve its capital position and benefit from the short end of the curve, which is what every single money market fund is doing. Their weighted average duration is 10 to 30 days, which also is the best place you want to be in terms of liquidity risk, interest rate risk, duration risk. So overall, right now, it's a no-brainer to continue to invest in this short-term retention and benefit from 5%. Well,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Personally, very grateful to have you here. I know this is just like the first of many kind of conversations. And so like I said, I don't think we'll bombard you with questions today, but I'm sure that we're gonna end up coming back to you, especially as some of these start to bubble up for more actionable like conversations. Unless anyone else has any like specific questions in the short term. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, no, if no one has any questions, I would just say, some features that are important are, notice, you can reward clients for stability of funds, for example. You can do brackets, tiers, just incentivize the right behavior, limit concentration risks, and all that kind of stuff that is involved in an LLM process. And we can learn a lot from the money market fund industry. They've been heavily regulated because of breaking the buck in the past, and have high liquidity ratios and are very competitive in this environment. So just something to think about if there are no questions.
Amazing. Well,
Thank you for inviting me.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Hey, Open Sky, do you do you mind just providing a little bit more details around your question? Okay. If we hold US Treasuries and rates drop, how do we deal with that? Well, in terms of maturity risks, I think the proposal was to stay within 90 days, and the best way to mitigate the maturity risk is what Dow's already doing, which is laddering. So if the 750 million is being split up into 62 million, so that every week a portion of the investment matures. That way, you're benefiting from the rates, but you're also maintaining it. You're also assessing on a weekly basis that you know if you can invest the full amount again, or if you need to retain a larger portion on chain based on the supply and demand. I don't think if your question is around like what can you do to earn yield, I think you should still stay short and not try to chase a longer duration at this point, because you don't know what you don't have a real good feel right now of what your minimum supply will be under different market conditions. I think what has been done and proposed is currently the best way to manage the assets. I would have preferred money market fund, but from what I read, this process has lower costs and is more beneficial in terms of deploying the assets. I think the maturity profile of the USDs that are being held is literally the same as the money market fund in terms of weighted average life and maturity. So really good job. Okay.
I see people typing, and I know I put it in the chat. I do have to jump in a minute, but if people are still conversing or have questions, feel free to stay, but I unfortunately do have to jump in a minute.
Likewise, yeah. I gotta go at 12.
Awesome.
But happy to continue.
Well, then, yeah, thank you so much for coming, and it sounds like if and when we compile more questions, we will definitely let you know. But yeah, really appreciate you joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much for the invite. Look forward to the next one.
Perfect. And thank you everyone else for your time on a Friday. As I mentioned, we're gonna prioritize getting some contests set up so that we can push forward with the experimentation for next week. Thank you, Open Sky, for running the contest from this past iteration. And yeah, we will start a Google Doc as well for starting to make these contributions together.